Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another Film Theory reaction. This is, I know how the new Superman movie ends. Which, oh god, I've completely forgotten, when is that coming out? Again, because, again, I've only seen the one trailer, and that was the one with, oh god, what was it? The Guy Gardner was the Green Lantern, the one with the stupid haircut? July 11th. Okay, so that's coming out for the summer. Okay. So yeah, again, from what I've seen, given that this is being helmed by James Gunn, if memory serves, who used to be on the MCU, I hope that, you know, it's better than the last DCEU offerings that arrived, at least on par with, like, you know, early MCU. But from everything I saw, like, I think there was even going to be Crypto in there or something, you know, Crypto the Superdog as well. Like, so, honestly, I have no idea where this next movie could be going. Because in, like, the last few decades, with all the superhero movies, well, Superman movies specifically, like, I don't really know where you could take him. Like, obviously, obviously this Superman movie is going to be another sort of origin story of him just either coming to Earth or just starting out, at least I think. Granted, I know it's been a while since I saw the trailer, so I might be a little wrong there, I don't know. But, yeah, let's see what Film Theory has to say on this then. So, yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video linked to my game theory reaction. And yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
I know the plot of the new Superman all from just its first teaser, and better yet, I know the plot of the sequel they haven't even announced yet. Yeah, really. So if you're excited for the film and just can't wait for it, take a seat and let me tell you exactly how it's gonna roll out.
You sure you might not be biting off more than you could chew? Let's see. I mean, if you're that confident, might as well see where you're going with this.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that believes a man can fly, before promptly falling to the ground in the Yamcha death pose. Speaking of, did y'all see the new teaser for the new Superman reboot? This thing was all over my feed, and everyone is excited about it.
Look up! Look up! Oh my god, look at here!
Oh.
Crypto is best boy!
And you know what? That also includes me. I love Superman. The big blue Boy Scout has always been a favorite hero of mine, so I'm hella excited for this movie. Like, being real, I've actually been planning on doing this theory on Superman since the movie was announced. We had a script all the way back in, like, December of 2023 before we had, like, any details about the movie. And that script predicted that Crypto was going to be in this movie before, like, any of that
surprise sound effect.
Needless to say, we got this video made just about as quickly as physically possible for us after this trailer dropped. Between writing and editing, it always takes us about 2 weeks to get a video made, and of course, this teaser dropped the second theorist was ramping down for the holidays. Gosh darn you, James Gunn, this better not be the start of a trend where you drop stuff as soon as we go on vacation. Anyway, this movie has...
I mean, it just seems to be a thing with, you know, the theory channels with, where, you know, given the last, not this one, but the last Poppy Playtime, theory that they did, Mob Games released the trailer for chapter 4 of Poppy Playtime literally the day they released their theory. So it might just be a thing. I mean, so just the theory channels are just going to be continuously playing catch up.
Has a lot of pressure on its shoulders. Not only does DC need a massive win after the disasters that were The Flash and Joker 2, not only does this need to live up to and justify recasting Henry Cavill for the main character, not only will this be the movie that will make or break the new DCU, but along with Marvel's Fantastic Four, it has people wondering if it can revive the genre, now that people are calling the 2020s the end of the superhero era. Will it be able to do that? I don't know. Honestly, I just want it to be a good movie first and foremost. But of course, I wouldn't be a very good theorist if I didn't overthink something about the movie, right? Well,
jeez, the end of the superhero era. You know what? Thinking about it, truthfully, I would be kind of happy if that was the case. Even if, you know, this and possibly the next few DC movies are good, I kind of want this, like, superhero era of movies to end. And I'm not just saying that's because, oh god, we've been getting a lot of good, you know, video game based movies recently, and I kind of want to see more of those, see what they could do, maybe potentially even get a BioShock movie out. Oh god, that'd be beautiful if we could. But also just I am so tired of all the superhero stuff. I still like hearing about superhero stories and stuff like that from the comics. It's a reason why one of my most regularly watched creators on YouTube is Linkara and stuff like that, where I like hearing about the stories and the history behind these comics and stuff like that. But honestly, as I've said before in multiple videos, I stopped watching the MCU after Infinity War. I have not watched another mainline MCU movie since then. I've never watched any of the shows, and just there is so much stuff. And they're, constantly putting out more stuff. Granted, they've slowed down recently because, they were putting out so much before that, they were starting to fall into the quantity over quality sort of deal. I mean, even with, Disney's massive resources, you start stretching yourself a little too thin. And I just, obviously, I don't want it to be the very end of superhero movies, forever. I just want us to have a little bit of a break, maybe a decade or something, where we can get to the point of missing superhero movies as a genre again.
Thankfully, despite just being a minute and a half long with basically no dialogue, DC head honcho and Superman director James Gunn still managed to pack this thing full of a ton of detail. Enough that I believe I can predict the entire plot of this thing, based solely on what we see here in this teaser and other quotes from Gunn and DC. And if that seems like a superhuman feat, well, get a load of this. Not only do I believe I can predict the plot of this Superman movie, but also its inevitable sequel. You heard that right. I'm going to tell you the plots for the next 2 Superman movies, all based on one teaser, and if I'm right, well, just call my superpower theorizing. Put on your capes, loyal theorists, we're about to go up, up, and away. Alright, just so we're on the same page here, the only sources I'm going to be using for this theory are either official ones or publicly available ones. That means the teaser, casting announcements, public set photos, and things from official sources like James Gunn or DC themselves.
You gotta love set photos like that where he's up, up, and away! He just doesn't leave because, he's human. I love that.
I will not be looking at any plot leaks or insider information for this at all. As for our methodology, we're gonna be looking at the teaser frame by frame and dissecting everything James Gunn has said about this movie, comparing that against the source material that inspired both this version of Superman and this story, and then identifying the themes I believe this story is going to be following. From there, using the rules of storytelling, we should absolutely be able to work out the plot of this film. So, with all that being said, the setup and what we know. Well, just from a surface level, we know this is not an origin story for Superman.
Oh,
this
okay,
comes
never
straight
mind,
from
it's
James
not.
Gunn, who said, quote, Superman's already existing. Lois and Clark already know each other. Lex hates Superman's guts from the beginning, although they don't know each other personally. That makes sense. Everyone knows Superman's origin story at this point, and we don't need to see it again. Additionally, Gunn said that most of the trailer's footage takes place from the beginning of the movie, though, quote, there are a couple moments that are from later, end quote. We'll just need to keep that in mind while we're putting together the plot from this teaser.
Okay. Okay, actually thinking, so 2 things that make me think of. One, so this is already, unlike with the MCU movies and, the previous DCU movies, so this is going to be just taking place in an already existing, DC universe. I guess that would make sense, given we saw Hawkman, and, Guy Gardner again, one of the Green Lanterns, and, other things like that. So, superheroes already exist, they're already established. What if we're going to see Batman, I wonder? But 2, I'll just continuing off that Batman point. One of the movies I've always wanted to see done in live action, for a superhero movie, would be, Batman Beyond. If you've never seen, the show Batman Beyond, go find it online. Absolutely wonderful. Basically, it takes place in the far future, and against all odds, Bruce Wayne got old to the point where he couldn't be Batman anymore. And because of that, his life kind of collapses, and he's just sort of like an old grump living in his mansion in his own solitude and stuff like that before, coming across a guy, a young man. The young man becomes the new Batman, and all that sort of stuff. And I'd love to see that approach, and I'd love to see that done in a movie on the big screen where, we've as we've said, we've seen Batman's origin story so many times, but we've always seen a young Batman. We've never seen an old Batman that's old to the point where he can't do his thing anymore. So, and I'd love to see that where he's having to come to terms with passing on the torch.
Okay, that's some broad strokes, but what about something more concrete or specific? Well, we can also tell exactly when this movie takes place. A newspaper from the set is dated Monday, May 19th, and 2025 is a year that has May 19th fall on a Monday. 2025 is the year the movie's coming out, and there's a lot of modern tech in it like cell phones, so yeah, that checks out. Likewise, this story exists pretty far into the DCU. From both Creature Commandos and the parts of Peacemaker that are still canon, we know that superpowers have been around for a long time in this universe. And in the teaser, we see a team of pretty established superheroes already.
Wait, the show Creature Commandos is canon to the movies? Really? Okay, I didn't know that. I thought it was just its own thing.
Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, and the Green Lantern, Guy Gardner. Finally, the teaser, set photos, and casting announcements have also shown us that characters like Metamorpho, Rick Flag Sr. from Creature Commandos, the Engineer from The Authority, and a mysterious character with a big U on his chest are all going to appear.
Ultraman!
That last one is either a villain named Ultraman or Ulysses, not sure which yet. Strangely, we also know that a lot of these superhumans seem to work for billionaires. Both the Engineer and Ultraman / Ulysses are henchmen for Lex Luthor, while Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific all wear matching uniforms with the logos of billionaire Maxwell Lord on them. It's kind of like they're pro athletes or something. Now, all of that is fairly surface level.
Weird,
we can learn
okay.
a lot more about the themes of the story being told here if we look at what inspired this film.
Listen, going back, that one clip where it looks like Superman's breaking out of like a containment cell or something like that. I wonder if the plot is going to focus around, like, as they've pointed out, superheroes are basically being hired out by, like, billionaires and stuff like that. And then Superman, being Superman, the pure-hearted big blue boy scout that we all love, decides to go independent. And I could potentially see that rubbing a couple of higher-ups the wrong way. Now that there's some superpowered individual, the most powerful superpowered individual in the world, who's not on who's not on anybody's payroll or something.
Gunn has said that this version of Superman is, quote, the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way, guided by human kindness in a world that sees kindness as old-fashioned. And when asked by a fan for a list of what inspired his take on the character, Gunn gave them a lot of options. They're all on screen here, I'm not gonna list them all out, but big ones that should stick out for us as film buffs are the Christopher Reeve Superman and Superman the Animated Series.
So you're not such a Boy Scout after all. Never even made it to my first merit badge.
Just classics, we love it. Oh, and also, DC themselves said that these storylines here directly influenced and inspired Gunn while making this story. Now, tonally, all of these comics and stories really lean into the hopeful part of Superman, the version of the character that will do the right thing no matter what, even at the cost of his own wants, needs, or even his life. A great example of this is All-Star Superman, which is all about Superman doing as much good as he can in the days before he dies. Even as his own life is ending, he wants to set the Earth and humanity up for success, inspiring even his enemies to be better.
If it had mattered to you, Luthor, you could have saved the world years ago.
While I don't expect Superman to die in this movie, I expect a lot of the same ideas and vibe to be in this film.
Jeez, can you imagine? Like, that's how the new DCU starts. With the very first movie, Superman dies. Jeez, talk about taking it in an unexpected direction.
And before we move on, another story that really stuck out to me here was Kingdom Come. This is probably one of the best stories in DC's history, all about an older Superman coming out of retirement into a world full of violent, reckless heroes, bringing hope and morality back to a cynical world. Does that sound familiar? Well, it should, because it's kind of exactly what this movie is trying to do. Regardless of what you thought about them, DC's movies over the last decade under Zack Snyder's leadership were darker, they were more violent and cynical. cycle. That's not a value judgment, it's just a fact, and this new James Gunn DCU seems like a rebuke of that. It's intentionally doing something completely different and bringing a real brightness and hope back to these characters. And I think it's safe to say that all of that was on the top of Gunn's mind while crafting this Superman, because even his emblem, the S on his chest, is taken directly from Kingdom Come. This Superman is carrying on the legacy of that story. And speaking of legacy, well...
Okay, so thinking back, I remember a quote from, Linkara again, and I forget what the video was, but he was talking about how, how Marvel and DC comics, their characters are, they're written very differently for one another, and they're given different flavors. Marvel heroes for the most part are very, they're very human. Like, you can 100% believe that they are, normal people, who were given powers, and they try their best, and all that sort of happens. Well, DC heroes like Superman, Batman, all that, they're very much more like people to aspire to. Like, I forget, like with Superman specifically, it's always been like Superman thinks of himself as a human, but yeah, he's because he's what humanity could strive to be if we tried, that sort of deal.
Though this movie is now just called Superman, when it was first announced, it had a slightly different title, Superman Legacy. And that is massively important, both for this movie and the DCU slate as a whole. See, a lot of the announced DCU projects involve the idea of legacy, transition, generational change, torch passing, family. I mean, just think about it. Brave and the Bold is all about Batman and his son. Lanterns is about an experienced Green Lantern taking a new recruit under his wing. Paradise Lost is a prequel all about Wonder Woman's mothers. Other projects like Teen Titans are about younger heroes coming into their own. Dynamic Duo is about the different generations of Robins. Heck, even Creature Commandos is about the successor to the Suicide Squad. So, okay, how does all of that apply to Superman? Well, other than the themes of being hopeful in a bleak world like we just discussed, I bet that this story involves Clark balancing his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing. And there just so happens to be a great Superman villain that can take that internal conflict and turn it into an external one. Brainiac.
Yeah.
Brainiac, what is it? Look, I just want some pants. A decent pair of pants.
Yeah, so this is Brainiac, one of the oldest Superman villains and pretty much his nemesis outside of Lex Luthor. He's basically a living computer, an AI from another planet obsessed with collecting every possible scrap of knowledge in the universe.
Oh, don't sell him so short. He's not just from another planet. He's from Krypton. Depending, granted, I'm no, comic book aficionado, but depending on, the version, which, I mean, I could very much see there being some version of somewhere where he's just from another planet. But he's, like, but depending on the version, he's, like, he was, like, a supercomputer on Krypton that purposely didn't, tell anybody that, it calculated the world was going to end so they can make sure that, Brainiac could escape. Instead of, wasting time trying to save the populace and all, that sort of stuff.
He also happens to be one of the biggest Superman villains that we've never seen in a live-action film, so there's fertile ground there. So why do I think Brainiac is going to be a major player in this story, even though he hasn't been revealed at all or even cast yet? Well, a couple of reasons. First off, there's the giant energy orb floating behind Lois and Clark in the first teaser image and trailer that is the same color scheme as Brainiac, purple and green throughout his many appearances, as well as seeming more like alien tech as opposed to something more human-based like Luthor. And
I mean, you never know. That could literally be just a red herring, and it's just like the future version of the Las Vegas ball, only this time it's like purely a hologram or something.
And secondly, one of the main storylines that DC stated influenced Gunn while he was writing this film was Superman Brainiac, a story where he was the main villain. This one just seems like a layup, and when you look at Brainiac's whole deal, you can see why this makes a lot of sense for the story. See, in both Superman Brainiac and the story that introduced him back in the 50s, Brainiac had preserved an entire city of Kryptonians and their knowledge, literally shrinking them and putting them inside of a bottle.
Jar, yeah.
And in a lot of continuities, like the DC
Bottle
animated
City
universe
of
that
Kandor,
we know Hero-influenced gun here? Brainiac is even just straight up a Kryptonian AI. If
There
this
we go,
Superman is one that's wrestling with his legacy, his Kryptonian heritage versus his human upbringing, what better way to make that into something tangible for this story? Here's a villain with the knowledge Clark wants, but he's also a danger for his new home. There's great multi-layered conflict sitting right there, and the drama writes itself, especially if other villains like Luthor can discover it and take advantage of it. Alright, so that's a lot of information. We sort of laid out a lot of pieces for a complicated puzzle, and putting them together will get us to...
Part 2, the sequel.
Plot of Superman.
Never mind. We haven't gotten to the
It's
sequel
May
yet.
of 2025. Clark Kent has been working at the Daily Planet for a while now with other reporters like Lois Lane, all while moonlighting as Superman. But he's still very much the new kid on the block. Other heroes like Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, and Hawkgirl have been doing this for much longer, enough so that they become part of the machine of society. Hero teams are often funded by corporations or billionaires like Maxwell Lord, or used by the government for secret missions as seen in Creature Commandos and the Suicide Squad. We actually see Mr. Terrific in some sort of desert fighting what look like mercenary commandos, probably on one of these privately funded missions. People are familiar with superheroes and these antics, but maybe they don't really trust them because all of these heroes are flawed and cynical. But Superman? He's different. He seems to have more power than these other heroes, but he's nothing like them. He's not dark or cynical. He does the right thing and is impossibly good. The kind of guy who stops to help save a cat from a tree or help an old lady cross the street. He's just an old-fashioned hero, all because he was raised with the ideals of truth, justice, and the American way by Ma and Pa Kent in Smallville, Kansas. A scene showcasing these values will almost certainly be our introduction to Clark and Superman in this world. He's headed to work, but keeps getting distracted and delayed by his superheroics getting to the Daily Planet late. We can see by the clock on the wall in this shot that Clark doesn't get in until 10:50. Clark's co-worker Lois Lane makes note of this. She's a smart cookie and has likely deduced that there's more to Clark than meets the eye. I wouldn't be surprised if she's already figured out that he's Superman. Anyway, Clark doesn't really know a lot about himself or his origin.
Oh god. If that were the case, then unfortunately we wouldn't get that one beautiful scene where Clark specifically tells Lois that he's Superman and she doesn't believe him. Oh.
See, I've lived in Metropolis most of my life, and I can't figure out how some yokel from Smallville is suddenly getting every hot story in town.
Well, Lois, the truth is, I'm actually Superman in disguise, and I only pretend to be a journalist in order to hear about disasters as they happen and then squeeze you out of the byline.
You're a sick man, Kent.
You asked.
God, I swear, again, that's one of those scenes I want to see done in live action so badly, just because of how absolutely funny it is.
He knows his parents found him in a spaceship, and he's discovered the Fortress of Solitude, so he knows he's an alien and maybe a bit about Krypton, but that's about it. But that changes when he discovers an alien supercomputer intelligence. Maybe it's a Kryptonian AI in the Fortress of Solitude. Maybe it's an unrelated probe that crash lands on Earth. Either way, this Brainiac promises Clark knowledge about his past and his people, but Clark either is having trouble getting to that knowledge, or maybe he doesn't like what Brainiac has to say. Either way, he keeps Brainiac in the Fortress of Solitude, along with other relics of his alien heritage, like Crypto the Superdog. But that alien heritage has unknowingly earned Clark a lot of enemies, the biggest of which is Lex Luthor. See, just like what happens in the Superman Birthright comics, Lex is a smart guy, like really smart, enough so that he's never really felt at home on Earth. He's never quite fit in with his fellow humans, and yet here is this Superman that is clearly something alien, and people love him? No, something's off. And even though they haven't met yet, Luthor does not trust Superman at all. So he wants to find proof that Superman isn't as super as he appears. Using all of his resources, he has probably been able to track Superman's activity up in the Arctic with the Fortress of Solitude, hatching a plan to break in. All he needs is a distraction. Soon enough, Luthor gets one in what is probably the big action set piece for the film's first act, as a kaiju attacks Metropolis. During this attack, Superman saves many lives, including a little girl that almost gets crushed, and stops the monster from crashing into at least one building. Eventually, Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific show up, and Superman helps them take down the kaiju, but not before some serious damage is done to the city. Superman is also hit by a fireball during this fight, burning his suit. After the fight, the Supers regroup at a nearby building. We see them arriving at this building in a set video, and there are several kids ecstatic to see Superman. Maybe the little girl he saved told her friends about him, but
that's
the rest of the crowd isn't as happy. This man in the orange vest approaches Superman and probably tells him that he could have and should have done more. People died. Isn't he supposed to be a hero? The cynical crowd turns on Superman, throwing things at him as he enters the building. The other hero...
Okay, you gotta give him credit. Like, he gets beamed in the back of the head by that, that can or something. He doesn't flinch or blink at that at all. That's good acting right there.
Was also come in and talk to Clark, perhaps telling him that this is just the way things are. Saddened, Superman flies away to his fortress of Solitude, only to find it robbed. Yeah, Luthor may have caused this kaiju attack himself, or just taken advantage of it, but either way, he uses it as an opportunity to break into the fortress of Solitude with his henchmen, the Engineer and Ultraman/Ulysses. We know this thanks to an extra scene put into a version of the trailer only shown in theaters, which sees them walking into the fortress. Here, the group wreck the place and end up stealing Brainiac as proof that Superman is an alien, and Superman arrives too late to stop them, and too late to save some of his beloved Kryptonian robot helpers. We know this has to be right after the kaiju attack because Superman and his suit are still covered in the same burns and soot. Anyway, things are only going to get worse for Clark. Just like in the Superman Birthright comic, Lex is going to use Brainiac to spread information about Superman's Kryptonian origins, framing him as an alien invader. Superman is going to have a bit of an identity crisis over this. But what if he is just an alien scout for an invasion? He no longer has Brainiac to ask about his history, but he can't let that get in the way of him helping people. Despite everything, Superman is still unwaveringly good, doing what he thinks is right, just like we see in the All-Star Superman storyline. This itself will inspire hope in people around the world, just like we see with this kid raising the Superman flag in the teaser. Angered, Lex will escalate things, continuing to frame Superman for increasingly awful things and working with the US government to capture him. This will lead to a battle with Ultraman/Ulysses, and eventually Superman's arrest with Rick Flag Sr. from Creature Commandos. We know that that's gonna happen from these set images and scenes from the teaser. Now,
oh God. Honestly, if this is true, honestly, I could just get behind the whole concept of more upbeat, Superman media after, the damage that the Zack Snyder movies have done.
Here's where things get a bit murky. Since most of the teaser footage is from early on in the movie, guessing the back half of this plot will be based more on the rules of storytelling and the stories that inspired this film's plot. But we can still get a pretty good idea. Clearly, Superman will be imprisoned in a strange jail for metahumans, while Lex starts targeting Superman's close friends and supporters like Lois and the Daily Planet. Lex will also probably begin tinkering with Brainiac to extract as much value out of Superman's alien technology as possible. And this is not going to turn out well for Lex, as he's tricked by Brainiac, who begins to accumulate knowledge and power for himself. At some point, likely driven by the fact that people in his personal life like Lois are in danger, just like we see in the Superman Ending Battle comic, Superman will break out of this prison in a big fight. I'm betting that this is where he gets injured and lands in the snow from the teaser, calling Krypto to take me home. And I bet that home Krypto takes him to isn't what Clark expects. He may think that they're going to the Fortress of Solitude, but instead, Krypto takes him to Lois and Metropolis, his real home. By this point, Lois will have
I would have said back to Smallville, but you never know.
Definitely figured out that Clark is Superman, and the two will embrace. Anyway, the third act will almost certainly see Brainiac gaining enough power to betray Luthor and attack Metropolis with the giant energy ball we see throughout the teaser. This is more or less what happens in the Superman Brainiac comic. Cue a big third act battle, Superman realizing that he doesn't need to choose between his Kryptonian heritage and human upbringing, embracing both parts of his legacy and using them to defeat Brainiac. The cynical people of the DCU are inspired by his goodness, while Luthor is furious and forms his next plot to take down what he sees as an alien freak. Roll credits, the end. Alright, so given the minute and a half of footage we have and all of the behind the scenes information and interviews, that's how I see the plot of Superman playing out. But
oh God. Again, I could very much see that. It does sound like a good movie. And thinking about it, Like, that does remind me of the whole thing from, oh god, I'm having a brain fart. What was the one where Superman was dying? All-Star Superman, that was it. But yeah, with that one, at least from like the animated version I've seen, Lex temporarily gains Superman's powers and, starts causing havoc like that. But because of that, he actually gains a new perspective and sees the world as Superman does. And when he loses the powers, just before Superman's about to die, he specifically asked, like, as you saw in the clip, it's like, you could have done so much. I could have saved the world with those powers. And, and Superman specifically says, like, if you wanted to save the world, you could have done that a long time ago, given that he's a literal billionaire and one of the smartest people on the planet, So so even just that, it's very simple, but it falls into the whole, grass is always greener on the other side sort of deal. But again, I'd love to see that done in live action.
But more importantly than that, I think all of this information that we've laid out here also gives us a good idea of where Superman's going after this movie. And that means it's time to talk about
the sequel.
The Superman sequel. Remember how I said that this hopeful, old-school Superman emerging in a world full of darker, cynical heroes felt like Gunn sort of answering the criticisms of previous DC movies? Looking at the gritty take on this universe created by Zack Snyder and deciding to do something completely different on purpose? Well, that might be a bit weird because one of the films being worked on right now is called The Authority. Stick with me, this is important,
The what?
I promise. See, The Authority was originally a superhero team published by an independent company with the premise of, what if the Justice League were bad? Yeah, this was way before stuff like The Boys made that idea mainstream. And the engineer, one of Lex's henchmen here in this film, is actually a core member of the Authority, which I expect to carry over here in the DCU. Anyway, this team was the epitome of 90s edge. Sure, they were heroes, I guess, but they weren't good. So, how are these characters possibly going to fit in with this brighter, more hopeful universe that Superman is spearheading?
I mean, I could eventually see it as if in this version of the universe, many superheroes are sponsored, maybe it becomes politically unfashionable to have, these grittier, darker superheroes when you have, the pure-hearted Superman doing it for nothing. So maybe, some of these heroes, quote-unquote heroes, are dropped by their sponsors, and to try to get back at Superman, they team up or something.
Well, earlier we talked about how this version of Superman was old-fashioned in a modern world. Specifically, Gunn described him as the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way, a catchphrase commonly associated with Superman. Well, I don't think that wording was something that Gunn just threw out off the cuff. One of the most famous Superman stories is What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way.
Yeah.
This was later adapted into an animated movie, Superman vs. the Elite. This story is all about Superman coming into conflict with a new group of edgy heroes called the Elite, led by the telekinetic Manchester Black. In addition to being cooler than old-school heroes like Superman, the Elite also thought themselves better because they adapted to what they saw as the modern world. They straight up killed the bad guys because, well, why shouldn't they? And while a lot of the world agrees with the Elite's approach, Superman doesn't, and they inevitably end up fighting.
And I remember watching that, and there was the one line, I forget who Superman was talking to at the time, but he was talking to somebody about like how the world was viewing the Elite and stuff like that, and he specifically said, what if they're going somewhere where I can't follow? Specifically talking about how, like, what if the world was going in a way where he just couldn't abide by the new rules being set? And again, I love this movie, but I love that line.
In case the very subtle metaphor isn't landing for you here, this is a story about Superman facing off against representations of the mature deconstructions of superheroes that became popular in the 90s and doing the exact same thing to them.
How does it feel, Black? How does it feel to be deconstructed?
Superman vs. the Elite was literally all about Superman punching the idea of characters like Homelander or Omni-Man or the Authority in the face, embracing the hokey, old-fashioned ideas of truth and justice to beat that cynicism. Something that becomes all the more clear when you learn that the Elite were created as a direct response by DC to the Authority. This entire concept is just a clapback. It's like Kendrick and Drake. Heck, after DC bought the Authority's publisher and incorporated the team into the DC universe, they put the Elite's leader, Manchester Black, on the authority to just flat out combine the ideas. Side note, I would bet hard cash that Manchester will be on the DCU version of the team, but I digress. All in all, this sort of generational conflict is incredible storytelling. And do you know who else loves those ideas? James Gunn. Seriously, go back and watch through his filmography, both as a director and a screenwriter. Gunn loves to have characters learn to be better than their predecessors, like with Star-Lord.
If you kill me, you'll be just like everybody else.
What's so wrong with that?
And also having characters embrace what makes them silly as the thing that actually makes them great. He did it with Polka Dot Man in the Suicide Squad.
I'm a superhero!
With Rocket Raccoon in Guardians of the Galaxy.
What's a raccoon?
Ain't no thing like me except me. The name's Rocket. Rocket Raccoon.
And heck, even Scooby-Doo.
Who do you think you are? Scooby? Dooby? Doo!
Yeah, James Gunn wrote the Scooby-Doo movies, by the way. That's just a fun fact for you.
I didn't know that. Wow, okay.
So, Superman versus the elites, or rather, Superman versus the authority, Superman versus the concept of heroes should be cynical? That is exactly the vibe of sincerity through satire that Gunn really seems to love, and why it's going to be the plot of Superman 2. It would fit with the old-fashioned Superman that he's set up here in this universe, with the idea of legacy that the whole DCU franchise is using as a core value, and with the authority film that's being developed standing out from the entire rest of the slate. It's setting up a natural crossover between these corners of his universe in a way that makes sense and will make the cinematic universe stronger. Man, we really just figured out the plot for 2 movies with like a minute and a half of teaser footage, didn't we? Feeling a bit super myself right now. Anyway, until next time, look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. Nope, it's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Up next.
I mean, granted, you know, the whole thing is that these are predictions based off of a single teaser trailer. But if they are true, I'd very much hope that they are true, because I definitely want to see something like that. Again, just as I was saying, like the whole thing where like that one line of I don't are they going somewhere where I can't they're going somewhere I can't follow, or other things like that. I'd love to see those depicted in live action. God, I mean, granted, you know, jury's still out on whether these new DC movies are going to be good because they're not actually here yet. But I hope they are good. DC was like just puttering along, just barely there for so long. If they can get out at least a few good movies, like, and kind of restore, you know, the Superman and stuff like that, and the public consciousness, I'd absolutely love that. And I'm saying that as somebody who's not a really big superhero fan or comic or a superhero movie fan. But yeah, anyway, that's going to be it for now. So yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video lead to my game theory reaction. And yeah, with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.